Hey everybody. So, I think for me the main theme of this holiday season, you don't have to belong to any of those religions or believe the tenets of those religions or have been born into them, but there's some beautiful messages of Hanukkah and the Jewish celebration, 8 days that of the miracle that happened I would say it's about 2,200 years ago in the land of Israel, and the Christmas holiday, obviously with the birth of Jesus. It's about never giving up is the main message. And I was very inspired. I'm a big sports fan, so I don't know if anybody was watching the Vikings NFL football game. Yesterday I had a big family day, lots of kids, grandkids, son-in-law, and friends. It was a great day, and then I had time to chill out and just watch the football game. But believe it or not, the Vikings were down 33 points in the first half. Now, just so you should know, that's like saying in baseball, if you know baseball, let's say you're down, I don't know, like 10 runs in the sixth inning. or if you're a soccer fan, today is going to be the World Cup final, Argentina and France. So let's say it's the second half of the soccer game, and your team is down 6-0 or 5-0, or if you're a basketball fan, let's say it's the third quarter and your team's down by 35 points. So one of the big lessons here is the Vikings are in the halftime. They're in halftime, and one of the players says, "Hey, listen. Once we were up 28-0, and somebody came back to tie us, and they did this. They came back. We can do this." And they've been doing it all year because they believed in themselves. They had team camaraderie, and they just put the past behind them, and they would focus on what's the next play. The young coaches, the coaching staff, was just the mental toughness to just say, okay, what's next? Let's just focus on what's next. But for all of us that have so many challenges in our life, I think this huge lesson that was said there was this can be done. Hey, other people did this. Let's say you're having health challenges, whatever the bad disease is, or whatever someone who you love is suffering from. You just have to keep a positive attitude, because there has been someone who's come back. There's been many people who come back. You'll come back, your loved one will come back, but you just have to stay in the game. You have to stay in the game. I've seen it over and over again. It's just about staying in the game, not giving up, never to give up. This is the message of the holiday season. Whether it's you trying to, kick whatever addiction it is, alcohol, drugs, bad food, sex, excessive whatever thing you're obsessed about, anger, and you try it, you can't give up. And you have to know that other people have been able to do it. If you're going into this holiday season and you're nervous and you're drinking and you don't think you can make it, people have made it. So many people have made it. You know so many people that have made it. You can make it. You're going to make it. If it's drugs, the same thing. People who've been trapped in the most horrific addictions. And I know people very, very close to me at this very moment that I'm fighting to have to save them daily. And, it's a tough thing, but you have to keep fighting to know that just focus on what you can do, and that it can be done. It can be done. There's nothing that can't be done if you have the desire for it, and you don't give up. And the Vikings were down 33 points in the half, and they believed in themselves, and they came back and they tied it, and they went into overtime and they won. It was one of the greatest sports events I think I've ever seen. Best sport event I've ever seen. They had another crazy game with the Bills that was almost equally as crazy, but not as crazy, a few weeks ago. So it's a beautiful, inspiring thing to remember, because, listen, the Hanukkah miracle for the Jewish people, and we all have to remember, whatever religion you are, if the Jews don't survive, you don't get to the level of having the Bible or having Jesus. So you have to take your inspiration and know the heroic efforts of the Jews that came way before Christianity and Islam. And the Jews, they take a lot of flack from Christianity and Islam because the actual Old Testament, the Torah, gives the Jews a lot of flack, but people that they didn't really believe, or they weren't loyal to God. There's a lot of places where it says it, but you have to realize that it wasn't speaking specifically about Jews in particular. Those who Jews were the ones who were given that message at that time. It was just speaking about people who were given an opportunity to do something, and they were given the tools to do it, and they were struggling with doing it. It's about everyone, because you could see after Christianity, every Christian has overcome the world. Every Christian has decided they're not going to throw the first stone. No, we see so many Christians have failed. Historians have said there's never been anything as bloody in the last 2,000 years than white Christians. If you look at all the world wars and all the colonialization and all the things that went on. So you got to, in the Quran, it starts speaking so bad about all the people, the Christians and the Jews before them, that supposedly didn't listen to God, and all the wrath that's going to come upon them. Every Muslim you don't see what's happening in the Islamic world. Islam has conquered 21 countries in the last 1,400 years, and it was very brutal, bloody takeovers. Like when ants really get along really well when you watch those ant hills inside, but when they take over another ant hill, it's the most gruesome thing. So Islam and terror, not all the people, obviously, because you have, millions and millions of peaceful Muslims, but there are bloody things and things that are written in the Quran that have caused Islam to a lot of people made a lot of sin and a lot of persecution and bloodshed from that. So we have to understand, when we're talking about the Jews, that it was just the first biblical thing. If you're on the Christian, Jewish, Islamic monotheism path, there were many holy books in India and other Zoroastric religions before that you can read about. So here you have this Hanukkah miracle where the Greeks are taking over the land of Israel. Now, Hanukkah, for those of you who don't know, Hanukkah is the only Jewish holiday that actually took place in the land of Israel. And whenever you see a menorah lit in somewhere, it actually gives historic proof to the Jews claiming the land of Israel. So it's hard to say that the Jews, have occupied any land in the land of Israel, because everyone knows historically, this is the Jews, this is their land. This is the Israelites, this is their land. So here they were, the Greeks. It's very deep, the whole thing of how some of the Jewish people the Greeks were starting with a lot of sport and theater and different things with food, enjoying this world in a way where, you know, it's questionable. There were a lot of Jews who said, hey, yeah, we have to add this to our spirituality. We don't need to renounce the world. Let's enjoy the world. Now, this is a big conversation. A lot of Jews started joining the Greeks. Alexander the Great had a few generations before this occupied the land of Israel, and he did not force the Jews to go along with Greek philosophy, and he let the Jews do their thing because he really respected the Jews, and he had seen a lot of things around the world, and he respected the wisdom and the holiness of the Jews. But then there came another king, Antiochus, another ruler, and so as a lot of the Jews started getting involved with the Greek culture, the Greek leaders at the time wanted to take over the temple, the Jewish holy place, and so they totally contaminated the temple, which was in Jerusalem. But the Jews were living all over the land of Israel, in Judea and Samaria, which you hear about today as being occupied. You can't say it's occupied because that's where the Jews were from. That's where they had lived. And they'd always, in the 3,000 years, always had lived in the land in different population numbers, and always dreamed that's the only place they dreamt of. It's not like in Islam where you have, you know, Muslims dream of Mecca in Medina, but they conquer other lands, and so they have so many other holy places, and then every other holy place that was holy to other religions, the Muslims also make that their holy place, not respecting other religions to be able to go there, which is a little bit weird. Now, that's not all Muslims. There's some Muslims that, you know, really give honor to the Christians and the Jews, and others just call them infidels, and it's very complicated. But we're talking about never giving up, and here the Jews where a lot of Jews were saying, yeah, we don't need to renounce the world. The truth is we don't need to renounce the world. But what is the problem that was going on? And this is a very interesting fact. What happens, I'm a sports fan. I like entertainment. There's nothing wrong with good food. But what happens is the Jews decided that they're going to light candles, and we're going to get to that miracle. But what the inner light, everything you're doing in life, you should not lose the point of the inner essence of what is the deeper thing behind everything that's going on. What is your true self? What is your eternal self? What is that part of you that you can feel has always been here and will always be here and is always connected to everything in the world? What is the source? What is the deep thing? What is that real thing that's not changing? What is it? There's something deeper going on here, but in life you can forget it, and this is the unholy side of the sports and the theater and the entertainment, because the most dangerous things in life, they're not the evil things. The evil things, we know they're evil. But what the Jewish leaders were saying is, well, listen, you're getting into a lot of things that it's not so bad, but the problem is because it's not so bad, if you're not really connected to your inner thing, you're gonna forget the world. So a lot of churchgoers who go on Sunday can know this and admit this, that, okay, if I do too much sports and too much theater and too much this and that, by the time Sunday does roll around, I have been disconnected from my heart center. I didn't overcome the world overcame me. Now those things, if in their proper proportions, sports, theater, healthy food, seeing nature, enjoying, with people in the world, has its place and has its thing that can be raised. It has a good way to do it, but then it has a way of you can get sucked in and forget about what the real deal is. So the Greeks had contaminated the whole temple And the few holy men, there was this family of these Maccabeans, because then they have the Jewish games called the Maccabee games, that are like the Olympics, Jewish Olympics. So these Maccabees, these holy people, they said, listen, we are going to take on all of the Greeks. And, when we're discussing all of these events so long ago, it's hard to know exactly the numbers, exactly the details. We can even argue about what happened on January 6th, 2020 still. And we can't get all the details right, and it's confusing. So what's going to happen? We have to take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to discussing historical things, and even what's written in these books. By the time it's translated and you get all the different opinions and in what context were things said. So, but the main thing is here, there was a military victory of a very few conquering a very powerful Greek nation. But what they had to do, they had to use holy oil that wasn't contaminated, that the seal wasn't broken, and they lit it one day, knowing they didn't have enough oil. It would take them another 7 or 8 days to make new oil. They only found the Greeks purposely contaminated all of the things of oil in the temple. So the Jews, what did they do? This is to never give up. They said, well, what we can do now is we can light this oil now. We don't have enough for tomorrow, and we're supposed to keep it lit every day, lighting this menorah. This Hanukkah was supposed to be, it was lit in the desert, in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and in the holy temple in Jerusalem. They said, let's light it. It's up to us to light it. We have the oil to light now. What will be after that, that's not in our hands. But we do have what we can do now. And miraculously, they say, it doesn't matter if it happened, didn't happen. Miraculously, say the oil that was only supposed to last for 1 day, it actually burned 8 days. And so that's why the Jews light the candles for 8 days, celebrating. But the main point here is, in life, we never give up. What can you do now? Now we're talking about never giving up our personal addictions, those who are trying to break out of it, those who are dealing with heavy situations. You have to narrow it down to what I can do, what I can't do. Many times in addiction, what we know, whoever has suffered from addiction knows that if you become under the grips of when that addiction hits, and it hits hard, there's really nothing you can do. You can get down on your knees, you can, whatever ritual or religious thing you think works for you, or spiritual thing works for you, you can cry out and you can be helped. But the main game is when it's not calling you so much, but you see there's a little voice there. What do you do in those moments? What do you do in those moments when you're dealing with, let's say, a family member who's under the grips of addiction, and you have to deal with it, and their lives are threatened, and you love them, and you don't know what to do, and you really want to give up? This voice says, I can't take it anymore, but you have to say, no, I can. Let me think about what I can do. Let me think about if I can get them some other form of help. What can I do? What kind of love can I give? How can I keep myself above water to help them? So this is the thing with these Vikings pulling off this victory. They said, let's just focus on the next score. One of the defensive players says, we're going to hold the defense. All you guys have to do is score 5 touchdowns. Now, they thought he was sarcastic, but he wasn't being sarcastic. He says, all we have to do is score 5 touchdowns. We got 30 minutes of football to do it. And they did it. So we have to focus on what we can do, one step at a time, never giving up. We just can never give up. Now, the Jews eventually, these same people who were actually were a little bit fanatic And that's where you have to be careful of fanaticism, because they didn't like that the Jews were mixing with the Greek culture of sport and theater, different foods and enjoyment and music. They said that will eventually lead people away from God and their inner being. And that can happen. But also, if you're fanatic, you can't repress and you can't obsess. That's not what it's about. You have to be aware and awake. You can elevate things in the world, but you have to be aware of it, where you're really holding. But these people eventually, I don't remember how long it was, maybe it was 150 years later, they actually were fanatic in their dealings with the Romans, and they got the Jews kicked out of Jerusalem and the land of Israel. They were just too fanatic. So that fanaticism that can save, that extremism can also hurt, and you can lose the battle. So you have to watch out for the extremes. Those extremes are very dangerous. Watch out for any philosophy or religion that gets involved in extremism. Now, when we're talking about the birth of Jesus, and you don't have to, this is not, people get a little bit confused by my teachings. I never tell anybody to either leave any religion or join any religion. I don't tell anyone to be a believer or not to be a believer. I'm into having things be your own experience, but I can get inspired by many different religions and many different teachings. Some of my biggest teachers that I like, I have teachers that I like that are from all different religions. The Hasidic teachings are from the Jewish religions, the mystic teachings. The Sufi teachings, there's beautiful Sufi teachings. The Sufis broke away. They were the mystic Muslims that broke away from traditional Islam, saying these guys are a little fanatic. This is not what God wants. And they were, some of them were killed by the Muslims. That's interesting, as I say. That is a Muslim woman walking behind me. I'm in Israel now, so even though it's very rare that something will just happen out in the middle of public, I do keep my eyes open because there has been terrorist acts and crazy stuff. But the majority of the Muslim population in Israel is very peaceful and have a lot of friends. And so the Sufi Muslims were very, very into music, and they rejected all the harsh things of the Quran and what it says about other people, and they took a different path. And also, some of my bigger teachers in India that I really enjoyed, they're big fans of Jesus, where they are not big fans of Christianity, because I've seen in Israel also the missionaries do a lot of crazy stuff where they, through trickery, try to convince people to be Christian, which I really don't think that's the way that Jesus wanted things, through trickery. So in India, they've had to deal a lot with that. And in Israel, you can see this missionary thing. Now, I'm not saying every missionary is bad. There's some people that do missionary work in an open way to help the poor and to give people an opportunity to come close to their own heart, their own faith. There is some good things mixed with other things that I don't think are so good. But let's just talk about, here's Jesus, and this is for all of us. We have to know what we have to do in the world. You have to go with your own experience. You can't be worried what other people say, and you just have to say what your own experience is. Not what you want, not what you're believing because someone told you something. I don't respect people who just, this is my faith, I totally believe it. They totally believe it because their parents or their teachers told them, but it hasn't become their experience. But Jesus had experienced the reality that, in my opinion, what he was saying to us, not that he was the Son of God, or not that before Abraham he was, but that that's what our reality is. If you overcome the world and you let the ego go, what is left? What is left is that God essence, which is everywhere all the time. It's not something separate. God is not a separate being from the world. The world and the God are one. And so here you have Now, it looked very bleak 2,000 years ago. Here he is on the cross, and he's left with 12 disciples. Not only is he only left with 12 disciples, but those 12 disciples also left him at the time of the cross because they were afraid. And who was left there was 3 women who went to his grave. Now, whether this happened or not is irrelevant for me, and there's no way to prove it or disprove it. But Mary, she goes, and she doesn't give up, and she finds Jesus resurrected. For me, the rebirth is about not giving up. It's not about whether you die and you physically come back. You know, we don't have to live our lives based on dreaming of things that we've never seen happen in the physical world. But we can, as the Vikings say, other people have done it. We can do it. We can have a rebirth. We can, today, one of my favorite lines in the New Testament is, if you hunger and thirst for righteousness, you will be fulfilled. Which for me is saying, everything is not written in the Bible. You know, some people like to come up with this thing as, well, God wouldn't make a world if he wouldn't give over some, you know, what do you call it? The handbook of the world, or the guidebook for it. And you just have to read that, and you'll know what to do. You'll know God, and you'll know what's right or wrong and everything. If that was true, it wouldn't say you have to hunger and thirst for righteousness to be fulfilled. It would just say, oh, you just have to read these words. So you would never have to use your mind. You would never have to struggle. God is hidden. Whatever it is, that which is hidden. It's always a paradox. It's deep. It has to be earned. You have to thirst for it. So thirst for your rebirth. Thirst for your not giving up. I believe in all of you, and may it be a blessed holiday season.